My name is Claire Bennett. And the night everything changed, I was sitting at the kitchen table in the house I grew up in, eating leftover pasta I had made myself, when my brother slid a manila envelope across the table, like he was closing a business deal. "We need to talk about your arrangement here," he said. I looked up. My mother was sitting across from me, not eating, just watching. My father was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. My sister-in-law, Dana, was standing near the doorway like she'd been rehearsing her blocking. I looked down at the envelope. "Open it," my brother said. "His name is Derek. He's 34. He has never once in his adult life paid a single utility bill in this house. He moved back in 3 years ago after his first business didn't work out, and somewhere between then and now, he had appointed himself the financial authority of the family." I opened the envelope. Inside was a document. 2 pages, printed, with a header at the top that said Household Contribution Agreement. There were line items, a monthly figure for my room and board, a separate charge for what they called shared resource usage, which appeared to cover the electricity, the water, and the Wi-Fi I had been paying a portion of separately for the past 14 months. And at the bottom, a total in bold. $12,000. That was the number they had decided I owed them. In back payments. Going back to the day I moved in. I had moved in 18 months ago because I was saving to buy a house. I had been very clear about that. I was working as a physical therapist, making decent money, putting away everything I could. Living at home was supposed to be temporary. My parents had told me their exact words, "Family doesn't charge family." I had offered to contribute to groceries and utilities. They had refused. They had said it wasn't necessary. That was 18 months ago. Now there was a document, with my name on it, and a total of $12,000. I read it twice. Then I set it down on the table very carefully. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "We've been talking," my brother said, "as a family, and we realized that it wasn't fair to anyone that you've been living here without contributing your fair share." "I offered to contribute," I said. "You said no." "You offered $40 a week for groceries," Dana said from the doorway. She said it the way people say things they've been waiting to say. "That's not contribution. That's a gesture." I looked at my mother. She looked at the table. "Mom," I said. "We think it's fair, Claire," she said quietly. "You have a good job. You're saving a lot of money. It's not right that you get to do that while everyone else here is struggling." I want to tell you something about that word, struggling. My parents own their home outright. My father collects a pension. My mother works part-time at a dental office because she wants to, not because she has to. The struggling they were referring to was Derek's struggling. Derek, who had moved back in with his wife and their 2 dogs, and had been working on a new venture for 34 months without producing anything resembling income. The struggling was Derek's, but the invoice was mine. "There's a payment plan," my brother said. He reached over and flipped to the second page. "First payment of $2,000 by the end of the month, then $800 a month going forward, plus the adjusted rate for room and board." I did the math quickly. The adjusted rate for room and board was, on paper, higher than the going rate for a 1-bedroom apartment in our town. "You're charging me more than market rent," I said. "We're charging you for everything included," Dana said. "Utilities, meals, parking." "I buy my own food," I said. "You use the kitchen." I sat with that for a moment. "You use the kitchen." I looked around the table. My father still hadn't said a single word. He was looking at a spot on the wall somewhere above my head. My mother was folding and unfolding the edge of her placemat. Derek had the expression of someone who had prepared for this conversation and was pleased with how it was going. I picked up the document. I put it back in the envelope. I stood up. "I need some time to think about this," I said. "End of the month," Derek said. "That's the deadline." I went to my room. I sat on my bed. I looked at the walls I had grown up inside, and I understood, for the first time, with real clarity, that the version of this house I had believed in had never actually existed. What I had believed was a home was actually a calculation, and I had been a line item in it for a long time without knowing. I didn't sleep much that night. What I did instead was think. I thought about the 18 months. I thought about every Sunday I had spent cooking dinner for the whole family because my mother's back had been bothering her. I thought about the 4 times I had covered Derek's car insurance when he claimed he was between accounts. I thought about the medical bill I had quietly paid for my father's MRI, because he mentioned once, offhandedly, that the insurance had denied part of it, and I saw how he looked when he said it, and I paid it without being asked. $3,000. I had never mentioned it to anyone. I thought about all the ways I had contributed to that house that didn't appear anywhere in Derek's document. And then I thought about something else. I thought about what my life would look like if I left. I had been so focused on saving for a house that I had been treating this situation as a waiting room. Head down, be useful, don't take up too much space, wait until the number in your account is big enough to leave. And while I had been in that waiting room, something had been shifting around me. The rules had changed. The people had changed. And I had been so focused on the exit that I hadn't noticed how much of myself I had handed over in exchange for what I thought was patience. I made a decision that night. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I was going to leave. Not at the end of the month. Not after the first payment. I was going to leave in a way that was clean, and complete, and mine. The next 3 weeks were quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't bring up the document. When my brother made pointed comments at dinner about people who take and never give back, I passed the bread and talked about the weather. When Dana mentioned the payment deadline in front of my parents like a reminder, I nodded and said I was handling it. I was handling it. Just not in the way they meant. I found an apartment. It took me 4 days. It was a 1-bedroom, 11 minutes from the hospital where I worked, with a parking space included and a landlord who had available starting the first of the following month. I signed the lease on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage, and when the confirmation email came through, I sat quietly for a moment and felt something I can only describe as the sensation of a door closing behind you when you realize you had been waiting for permission to open it yourself. I gave my employer my updated address. I forwarded my mail. I arranged for movers. I did all of this without saying a word to anyone in that house. I also pulled together every piece of documentation I could find. The text messages from my father, from 18 months ago, saying don't worry about paying us anything, just focus on saving. The Venmo records showing what I had paid toward utilities every month for over a year. The bank transfer showing the $3,000 for my father's MRI. I wasn't planning to use any of it. I just wanted to have it. I wanted to know that I knew the truth, even if no one else in that room ever acknowledged it. Moving day was a Saturday. I had arranged for the movers to arrive at 9 in the morning. My parents were going to be at my aunt's birthday lunch. Derek and Dana usually slept until 11 on weekends. Everything went exactly as planned. By 11:15, my room was empty. I had left the furniture that belonged to the house and taken everything that was mine. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "I've found my own place. I wish everyone well, Claire." That was it. No rant, no list of grievances, no itemized document in a manila envelope, just my name, and a period, and a clean exit. I drove to my new apartment. The movers were already there. I stood in the middle of my empty living room and looked at the light coming through the window and thought, this is mine. This is only mine. And no one is going to slide anything across a table at me in here. My phone stayed quiet for the rest of Saturday. It stayed quiet all day Sunday. Monday morning I was making coffee in my own kitchen before my shift when the first message came through. It was from my mother. "Claire, we came home and your room was empty. Can you call me?" I read it. I set my phone face down on the counter. I finished making my coffee. I went to work. During my lunch break I had 4 more messages, 2 from my mother, 1 from my father, 1 from a number I didn't immediately recognize that turned out to be Dana's cell phone, which I had never had saved. My father's message said, "Claire, please call us when you get a chance." Straightforward, mild, like I had simply forgotten to check in. Dana's message said, "Hey, this is Dana, just wondering if everything is okay. Your mom is upset." I found that one interesting. The concern in it. Your mom is upset, rather than we were wrong or we want to talk. As if my mother's upset feelings were a problem I had caused by leaving, rather than a consequence of what they had done. I didn't respond to any of them that day. Tuesday evening, just after 8 o'clock, my brother called. I watched his name on the screen until it stopped. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and finished the episode I was watching. He called again at 8:40. Then my mother called at 9. Then my father called at 9:15. My father, who had stood in that kitchen with his arms crossed, and had not said one word while his son handed me a document telling me I owed $12,000 for living in my childhood home. I didn't answer. At 9:52, I received a text from my brother. I want you to understand that I am not exaggerating or paraphrasing when I tell you what it said. I took a screenshot. It said, "Claire, this has gone far enough. You leaving like that was immature, and it upset Mom and Dad. We need to sit down like adults and discuss the situation. There are things going on with the house that you don't know about, and your leaving makes everything harder. Call me back tonight." I read it twice. I noticed he did not say he was sorry. I noticed the phrase "like adults," which was interesting given that the adults in that house had printed a 2-page invoice and slid it across a dinner table. I noticed things going on with the house, which was the first suggestion that something practical, beyond my leaving, had become a problem. I texted back one sentence. "I hope everything works out." I turned my phone off after that and slept better than I had in months. Wednesday morning I turned my phone back on and discovered that I had 11 missed messages and 3 voicemails. I listened to the voicemails. The first one was from my mother, and she was crying. She said she didn't understand what had happened, that she thought we were a family, that she just wanted to talk. I listened to the whole thing. It was hard to hear. I want to be honest about that. She was my mother, and she was crying, and it was hard to hear. But I also thought about the fact that she had sat at that table and said, "We think it's fair, Claire," while I was holding a document that said I owed $12,000 in back payments for sleeping in the room I had grown up in. Both things were true at the same time. The hardness of hearing her cry, and the clarity of what had actually happened. The second voicemail was from my father. He said they were dealing with a situation with the mortgage, and that he was hoping I could call him when I had a chance. His voice was different than I was used to. Quiet in a way that my father, who had spent 30 years being the loudest person in any room, was not usually quiet. The third voicemail was from my brother. It was 8 minutes long. I will summarize it. He explained that the house had a second mortgage that my parents had taken out 2 years ago, partly to help cover costs after Derek moved back in, and that they had fallen behind on it, and that there was a notice of default, and that the situation was serious and time-sensitive, and that the family needed to come together to find a solution. I sat with my coffee, and I listened to my brother use the word family 11 times in 8 minutes. This was the same brother who, 9 days ago, had handed me a printed invoice and told me my first payment was due by the end of the month. I want to be clear about what I felt in that moment. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel the satisfaction of watching karma arrive on schedule. What I felt was something much quieter and more complicated than that. It was something close to grief. Grief for the version of my family I had wanted them to be, for the home I had believed in, for all the years of dinners I had cooked and bills I had quietly covered in the hope that it meant something to them. It didn't mean nothing. I don't think that anymore. I think they simply did not have the capacity to see it, because they had spent so long arranging everything around what they needed that they had lost the ability to perceive anything else. That realization was not satisfying. It was just true. I called my father back that afternoon. He answered on the first ring. "Claire," he said. "Hi, Dad." There was a pause. Then he said, "Thank you for calling." I let that sit there. "Your brother told me he left you a voicemail," my father said, "about the mortgage." "He did. It's not good," he said. "We've been trying to handle it quietly, but we're behind by more than we can cover right now. And the bank sent a formal notice, and we have about 3 weeks before they can start the process." I asked him what number they were short. He told me. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Dad, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay," he said. "Did you know about this mortgage situation when Derek put that document together?" There was a long pause. "Yes," he said. I had expected that answer. I had expected it the moment I heard my brother's voicemail. Because the invoice, the household contribution agreement, was not about fairness. It was not about what was right. It had been about finding a way to extract money from the one person in that house who had money, before she figured out what was happening and left. They had needed $12,000, or close to it, and they had dressed it up in language about contribution and family obligation. And they had sat across a dinner table from me and performed the role of people with principles while doing it. That was the thing that hurt the most. Not the document, not the number, the performance. I need some time to think, Dad, I said. Claire. I'll call you by the end of the week, I said. I promise. I hung up. I spent the next 2 days thinking about what I owed, and to whom. I thought about the word owe. I thought about what it meant to be connected to people who had looked at you and seen, primarily, a resource. I thought about the $3,000 for the MRI, and the car insurance, and the Sunday dinners, and all the ways I had poured myself into that house, and all the ways none of it had ever been named or acknowledged or given language, until Derek sat down to write a document and decided to name only the things I had not done. I also thought about my mother crying on that voicemail. I thought about my father's voice going quiet, and I thought about what it would mean to help. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, not because a document told me I had to, but because I chose to. Because despite everything, despite the invoice and the performance and the 18 months of being treated like a tenant in my own history, they were still my parents. And somewhere underneath all of this was the fact that I loved them, complicated and bruised as that love had become. On Friday, I called my father back. I told him what I was willing to do. I would help cover the shortfall on the mortgage, not the full amount, but enough to stop the formal process and give them time to restructure. I would do it as a loan, documented properly, with a signed agreement and a repayment schedule. Not a gift. A loan. Because a gift would be another deposit into an account that had no record of balance, and I was done making deposits into accounts like that. I told him I would not be moving back in. I told him that if he wanted a relationship with me going forward, the dynamic would have to change. I did not list demands. I did not present a document. I simply told him clearly and without drama that I was willing to be his daughter, but I was no longer willing to be a budget line item, and he would need to decide which one of those things mattered to him. My father was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Claire. I should have said something that night. I should have said something before the document ever got made. I sat there and I said nothing and I'm sorry." It was not a complete apology. It did not cover everything. But it was real. And it was his, and I decided it was enough to work with. "Okay," I said. "Let's figure out the paperwork." My brother called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 3 sentences. "Dad said you're going to help. Thank you." I know things got complicated. I did not call him back. I helped my parents because I chose to. Not because they deserved it, and not because they had earned it, and not because of any sense of duty I felt I owed the house or the name or the family mythology my brother liked to invoke when it was convenient. I helped them because it was the thing I could live with. Because there is a version of walking away that is clean and right and necessary, and there is a version of walking away that you have to drag behind you for the rest of your life, and I knew which one I could carry. The loan is documented. The repayment schedule exists. My name is on it in a way I chose, not in a way that was handed to me in an envelope. I live 11 minutes from the hospital now. I make my own coffee in my own kitchen. I sleep without wondering what will be waiting for me at the dinner table. My mother and I talk on Sundays. It is careful and slow, and not what it used to be, but it is honest in a way it never was when I was living inside her house and telling myself that keeping the peace was the same as having one. My brother and I do not speak. That is his choice as much as mine, and I have made peace with it. Here is the thing I want to say to you. If any part of this sounded familiar, the people who love you are not always able to show it in ways that protect you. That is a true thing, and a hard thing, and it does not mean you have to keep making yourself smaller to fit inside someone else's version of what you owe them. You are allowed to leave a room without explaining yourself. You are allowed to make a decision that is yours. You are allowed to help from a position of strength. with your eyes open and your name on the paperwork, instead of from a position of guilt, with someone else's hand on the pen. That is not cruelty. That is not selfishness. That is just knowing the difference between a home and a transaction and choosing, finally, to live in one of them. Before I go, if you're watching this and you've ever sat at a table and been handed something that looked like a family conversation but felt like an ambush, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below, tell me what time it is, where you're watching from, and tell me, when did you first realize that keeping the peace wasn't the same as being at peace? I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something you needed to feel today, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. There are people out there still sitting at that table, still holding that envelope, still trying to figure out what they owe. Sometimes all they need is to hear that someone else chose to put it down.